Pues bien, demos la cordial bienvenida a nuestro amigo David Hogg.
Thank you. Buenos días. That's my Spanish, I'm afraid. Good morning, everybody. I am really impressed to be here. I enjoyed very much Antonio's setting up for what I'm going to be saying, and it's going to be fitting squarely into what I've just heard, and I appreciated that very much. And I have to also thank Enrico for help making this possible and getting us to this particular stage. One of the things that I thought I would talk about after some discussions with Enrico and hearing this morning and seeing what you have done in Monterey, there's a lot of parallels with what you have done, and I envy some of the things that you've done. First, the facility you have here is fantastic. It is just a beautiful facility. And as I spent some time getting familiar with Monterey yesterday, I had a sense I was in a industry, a supportive community. In other words, not all of our communities honor manufacturing and honor industry in the same way that I see that you have done. One of the things that I thought might be useful, I started way back almost 30 years ago, 25 years ago, 30 years ago, and it was in regard to having a concern for how do you sustain your profitability, and that was important back in those days as well too, as far as that's concerned. But we began to realize that one of the biggest untapped resources was access to other companies and other people. In other words, exchanging, just like I hear you're doing and doing a lot of. The popular term I'm hearing these days is collaborative learning. And we're going to be needing to do more than that to be able to move at even faster rates as we begin to look at the competitive nature ahead of us. And I was going to share with you what has been happening from that beginning, and you'll see a lot of the parallels, but I want to focus on actually sharing with you some of the things that may be of use to you. And I'm hoping that at least one thing out of this brief conversation with you is going to be a takeaway, one that you can actually put to use. And honestly, over the years, I have tried to zero in on every keynote speaker and see if I can come away with at least one thing that I can take back. And I remember being in the UK, this was years ago, when we were being entertained by, in fact, we were going through a major plant and they were taking a look, or we were taking a look at what they were doing. And they made a point, and the Director General made a point, that somewhere between 50 to 70% of the waste inside your companies is there not because you want it, it's there because you cannot see it, because you're living in it every single day. And as we flew back across the Atlantic from that, we started talking. It was 24 companies in that flight. We started really taking a listen to this. And what we did is we decided to make our companies from that point on tour ready. In other words, open the doors, clean them up, etc. and so forth, and invite people to come in and ask us questions as to why we do things in these ways. That all came out of one visit with one particular managing director in the UK, and when we put that in place, it worked out fantastically well, especially for those companies that made the employees the tour guides. That paid off. Everybody won on that, and there's tons of these things we picked up over the years. So I already got some clues already this morning, and I'm going to be getting more here today. So let's see, how is this? Okay, we're up and running here. In terms of sustainable profitability, I think when we started looking at that as the focus. But as you begin to realize, looking at that or looking at lean, you're beginning to realize that what's really important is focusing on the outcome, on what the outcome is. And of course, our outcomes deal with customers. That's where the real target is. So as we begin to look at sustainable profitability over the years, we began to look at that as the outcome of doing many things right. That was the approach. So I thought we'll give a little snapshot of some of the challenges ahead, some of the things that we see as barriers, some of the things we have to work with. And they were already touched on this morning here. Antonio did. And we really only have three things to work with. We have people, we have processes, and we have technology, and it doesn't get much more complicated than that. And the winners are those who can bring people, processes, and technology together in the most effective way and focus on their customer in the waste-free environment that they can possibly achieve. So, those are some of the things we have to work with. An area where we have got difficulty, and I've had difficulty over the years, has been vision, and did I say vision? Really. That word means different things to different people, and that's too bad. And you get an indication of whether you have a vision problem when you hear somebody inside your organization turn to each other and they say, I wish we could get everybody on the same page. Has that ever happened here? That has happened here once or twice. It's happened a lot with us as far as that's concerned. Well, how do you get people on the same page? The only way that can happen is to get them looking at the same vision in the same direction and beginning to understand what it's all about. So we'll touch on that a little bit more because that's so important. And we see so many companies fail because they do not select the right vision or they pay no attention to it because they get too busy, and that's dangerous. Lean leadership, some updates on that. And a little bit to action. It's a series of questions we ask each other in our different consortiums. So in a nutshell, my role when I started off was to put together a group of about 19 companies, and it was to really pursue, as I was saying before, sustainable profitability, but world class was all we could think of, and this was back in the late 80s and the early 90s because lean hadn't been popularized at that point. So we started off at that. We came up with a model, but the model was from the companies themselves, from the people themselves, just like you're working together. That's how we started, and we've never varied from that. And when we got that concept, that model, it began to spread right across Canada, through all of the provinces, right out to British Columbia. But then the U.S. started to hear about it, so then it got started down in Portland and a variety of others, and now Chicago and a variety of other places. And the Australians heard about it, so we started a consortium cluster like this in Australia. And every year when there's a major conference up here in North America, that same group, about 20 to 24 Australians, come up, and they're going to be heading up to Toronto in October, because that's when the next major conference is. And it's all part of the same kind of spirit that you have, which I see you developing here among your companies by working together and getting to know each other. And it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and I hope at some point there may be an opportunity for us to link and exchange with each other. It's happening more and more. We're getting some nibbles from the UK right now, but there's some interesting things happening. So let's get started. The challenge. If you can't see that, just try to listen to me. I'm going to try to be very clear on what my intent is at any rate. And if you wish these slides afterwards, you certainly are welcome to. I'll give them to Enrique. I'll give them to you, and you do with whatever you wish with them. You can have them. That's one of the things we've always believed in the consortium, and that is that information that is not in motion is muda, if it's not moving. So we make it move, and the way you've set this conference up, I can see you believe the same way. Well, there's four things. This is from a Canadian analysis indicated. Number one was leadership. I don't think anybody will disagree with that, so we'll look at that a little bit more later, because that's a big challenge we face right now. All kinds of leadership. Lean itself, we need to take a fresh look and keep in step with it, because as you go through lean, you get to a level and you see things you never saw before. Then you get to the next level and you see things you never saw before, and this is absolutely endless, and it's absolutely why it's such a mistake when we go into a company, or we think it's a mistake anyway, and they have done 5S. That's it, nothing more. And they're done. This is it. This is lean. That's not lean. That's 5S. And all they've started is to begin to give some discipline now to the tool arrangements and things like that, and a sense of organization of a place for everything and everything is. But that is just the beginning. And it's too bad that, some are like that. Well, we're working on that. We're getting that turned around. The thing that I'm going to speak of 2 or 3 times today is something that's kind of a hot topic at the moment. 2 years ago, when we started putting together an international conference for the Association of AME, and the one in October, we started trying to find out, well, where are the main issues right now? And we remembered a discussion from Jim Womack that was mentioned. Jim Womack, and he talked about horizontal value stream flow as being the biggest challenge we face. And I'm going to show you that in just a minute. And as we got into it, we began to agree, and we began to take a look at some number of the other things. So that's a challenge for us. Horizontal value stream flow. Wouldn't it be idyllic, and Antonio talked about in an ideal world. In an ideal world, wouldn't it be ideal if all the things you do, and they flow horizontally, manufacturing and most processes all flow horizontal, but if every single one of those would flow, all the ones that go on inside your organization were boiled down to one. Now, one of our companies started off and they did this department, this department, this department, and they did hundreds of value stream maps until they got one. And that is impressive. If you ever get to that level, you have driven out a huge amount of waste, and you could actually put the key characteristics on one page, and that one page can mean an awful lot. You begin to realize how much more there is to do. So we'll touch a little bit on that. Innovation. I'm not going to say a lot about innovation today, except that please keep in mind, and we're trying to remind our companies as well too, is that there's 4 kinds of innovation, not one. The one people get excited about is product innovation. Okay, that's okay. But that involves some professors and involves only a few people in the organization, and the rest of us don't get involved until it starts to move into production. I think we should get a lot more excited about process innovation, because process innovation involves all of us. And all of us are going to be contributing to the success tomorrow. And if we're involved now, and it's made part of our job to be focusing on, and we're recognized for, and we're honored for the improvements we make in our process innovations, we're going to be in a much better place in much faster time. Now, the other 2 kinds of innovation that are important is management innovation, because if we're going to be able to work together as a team, full team, all employees, all leaders, etc., we'll have to evolve different leadership styles to make that work, and it's already underway. And of course, the other one is management leadership. No, marketing leadership. Because as you get good, and you can make more, and you can make things faster, you'd better have the market to absorb all that. That's where you want to go. So you're going to be wanting to look at new markets and that kind of innovation. That's about all I'm going to say on innovation this morning. But it's a challenge for us. Here is the kind of the challenge we're throwing at us about 3 years ago. And it goes like this. It says, the biggest barrier manufacturers face is the inability to build robust end-to-end horizontal value streams. I'm kind of saying what I just said a few minutes ago. Does that make sense? And down below is the graphic we put together to try to communicate to the world that they should come to this conference, and that's what that is. And let's keep it simple. Imagine yourself doing a Gemba walk of a company, and you can choose which end to start at. It doesn't really matter. But let's say you start at the one side, and the one side being where it's the customer need is being identified. Well, then as you walk through the flow of customer value-adding activities from station to station to station to station to station, that's what we're talking about. Get that into a smooth, continuous flow. Well, you can't do that. It's not an ideal world. As you flow things through, you start bumping into these things called silos or jurisdictions or verticals. And that's why you'll hear me say probably one or two more times before this is over, how on earth are we going to be able to really establish a horizontal value stream flows when we are managed vertically? So how do you survive in a horizontal world where you're actually being managed and actually driven vertically? And that makes it almost impossible to make an entirely perfect organization, is because of that complexity. But what it does do, it gives us a clear idea of the kind of considerations we need to start making. How can we work with each one of these barriers, each one of these silos, who have priorities that they're concerned about with everyone? How can we get them to look at the priority of the flow that matters most? And that flow is the horizontal value stream, and the reason it's the most valuable, it flows to who does it flow to? Somebody say customer, please. Okay, customer. Thank you. Okay, it flows to the customer. Now, this is just a little different way of looking at it, and all I'm saying here is if you take a look at the left-hand side, what you've got, this is taken out of one of our Australian visits, and there's actually 3 lakes, and one flows into the other and flows into the other. Well, you can use that analogy to look at your own company, and you can say, all right, well, one department, it does whatever it does in terms of adding customer value, and then it flows to the next department, and then from there it flows to another department, etc., and then eventually it flows on to the customer. So that's a legitimate and easy to understand concept. It's just that we need to put it up here more and more as we walk through our plants every day and keep thinking about, are we really moving in that direction? And that diagram on the other side is just saying the same thing all over again, and is talking about, how to build, how to think, and how to act horizontally when you're in a vertically managed world. And that's a challenge. The targets, we've been using this one. This one has come from the management performance index group, inventory group. It's called Next Generation Manufacturing. We've been using this for years. It goes right back to Industry Week, if you remember them, when they did the benchmarking study. We followed it all since then. But here's what has been identified. 5,000 manufacturers, predominantly in the U.S., predominantly small, medium-sized manufacturers like ours in Canada, and from what I understand today, a lot of yours as well too. They identified, if you're going to be world-class, and if you're going to identify the things that are really important as far as you know as a leader to make your company successful in 5 years, what would it be? So out of these 5,000 companies, when they were asked this, they came up with, number 1, superior processes is our biggest challenge to our success in the next 5 years. Okay? Now that was stated in 2009, and there was some intermediate discussions in 10 and 11, and the brand new studies coming out, going to be released at the conference in 2013 this October. Number 2, customer-focused innovation. This means really breaking the barrier there may be, and I'm hearing from what I'm heard here already, is that you have very little barriers there already, but you're working at eliminating them between the customer and also with the, with the supplier. So customer-focused innovation. We have to move fast. And the only way you can move fast is know exactly what the customer's feeling, exactly what they're thinking, etc., and have them directly involved so there can be no mistake. Number 3, people, people, people. We are buying more expensive equipment. Our processes are getting more complicated, but we're leaning them out. It's the right thing to do, but we need more talented people to be able to do this. So here's our problem going forward. Number 1, we have to get the right people on the bus in the first place. If you have read Jim Collins' book, Good to Great, that is a wonderful book. It's 10 years old now, but it is a wonderful book. But he very bluntly will tell you and me that your most valuable assets are not your people. And then when you step back and say, wait a minute, where's this guy coming from? He'll then come along and he'll say, no, your most valuable people are the right people in the right seats on your bus, driven by the right vision, going in the right direction. That's your most valuable. That's your most valuable assets. And that's why we look at level 5 managers of the type that try to drive in that direction. And the rest of it here, supply chain, the big changes in supply chains are that a lot of us remember the early offshoring we've met on, then the nearshoring, then the reshoring, now it's the right-shoring. Well, sifting through all of that, when we look at what kind of makes sense here today, right-shoring is about the best shot. Because right-shoring means you locate production facilities offshore only when you have to address a particular market that you could not get any other way. But what it also means is that what you've got here, etc., you're going to be shrinking the distance of your supply chains. And there's a lot of complaints, you've been seeing them, I'm sure, we all are, about the difficulties in supply chain management when you get too big and you find out you're relying on international colleagues that don't quite measure up, and as a result, things can happen when you're asked to go faster. The last 2, just very lightly, don't overlook this. I shouldn't have put the word green in there because that turns a lot of people off. People immediately think of tree huggers, and that's what we think of in Canada as tree huggers, among other things, of course. But anyway, that's not what that means. What sustainability means is that you take a look at what you're doing and how you're doing it, and you try to ensure the way in which you do it is not going to hurt you in the future. That's kind of a sustainability approach. It focuses on the social issues, which is your people. It focuses on the environmental issues. It also focuses on the economic issues. There are not many others. It focuses on those. And in just 3 years, the demand on suppliers to have sustainability type capabilities has gone up because the customers have required that of us. It did not go down. The demand for sustainability did not go down during the recession. It stayed the same. And now it's heading back up. Now here's the problem. You may decide it's not for you. But when you think of the suppliers that your customer is looking for, and they have 4 to choose from, and one offers this sustainability situation, or they've got some addresses to it, it's increasingly they're going to take that choice, even though they may have been with you for a lot of years up until now. At least that's exactly what some of our folks are beginning to find. And of course, global environment and involvement, as things get bigger. So what we have, I think I've touched on that. People, processes, and technology, and all I'm saying in this little diagram here is, hey, you hire people to execute your processes. Okay, so if you hire people and train them as to what lean can do, and they execute your processes, chances are your processes are going to get better. And as they get better, that means that those people have actually learned things from that process of getting better. They should have some input into the determination of the technology that is to come. And still we run into this, where the technology that's bought tends to be bought without reference to the people that brought the company to that state. What has gone best is where the people who have made those particular improvements, where they're involved in determining the next level of technology. Because in lean today, tying lean into technology is absolutely where it's going at the moment. You can get tremendous benefits from that. This is for anybody that gets the slide afterwards. It just points out a number of things that we miss out on. And we tend to have, I guess in Canada anyway, we have this, been there, done that attitude. We did it once, then you forget about it, or I know all about that, and then you go on to talk about something else, but you never really harvest the value. I'm talking about this, an example, for example. The greatest barrier is humiliation and embarrassment. Well, we know that. Well, what are you doing about it? Are you really working hard to make sure that when you have people, teams, put into something new, that they're protected from being embarrassed or centered out? Well, that happens every day and everywhere. It's something to pay in mind. And do we understand still that of all the motivators we talk about, the number one motivator for the human being above all others is achievement. Achievement begets achievement begets achievement. That's the reality of it. So when you think of this, and many companies, when we say this, they said, well, I knew that. What are you doing about it? Well, I never thought about it. You can be doing things like, okay, I'm setting up a new effort with our Kaizen, whatever it is. In what ways can I help this team be successful? Or I'm doing something else over here. In what way? It's worth the investment. It's more work for management to make it happen, but if management starts thinking about it, there's a payoff, and it's a pretty sizable payoff, not only for today, but for tomorrow and the day after when more innovation is needed. There's a slide that just says that this consortium concept that I've been mentioning is growing. So what you're already doing here now, of collaborating and working together and learning, etc., it's only started really to grow in the United States, and that's the number they've got so far. We actually started ours back in 1983. As far as that's concerned. So we got a whole bunch of them there. We've had them for a lot of years, and we've been helping put them in place and helping AME to put it in place. But it's indication of the trend. As we're faced with more challenges, more requirements on innovation, we need more stimulus and information exchange between different companies. It's not complicated. That's an example of one. Now the vision. I said I needed to talk about the vision. I don't know, has anybody ever run across a statement inside their company of one person asking the other, are you, I wish everybody could be on the same stage, same page. I think I saw some nods before. Well, the reason for that, of course, is this. Vision. Let's be clear on vision. The definition of vision is future desired state. That's what a vision is, a future desired state. And make no mistakes, the job of vision is singular, and that is direction, direction, direction. Vision is there to give you direction. Mission does not give you direction. Values do not give you direction. Only vision gives you direction. And just think, if you could imagine your whole organization with everybody zeroing in on that laser dot on the wall that you have called your vision, and you required that in your organization you did not accept any other activities that were not aligned with that laser dot on the wall, would that make a difference? Would that make a difference to the amount of waste in your company? Would that affect your profitability? How about your competitiveness? And the answer is pretty clear. I think everybody would agree. Now here's 4 points. I'll just leave you with these. If you want to know what a good vision looks like, it'll have these 4 elements. Number 1, it will be leader conceived and initiated. And wise leaders will involve the people in the development of that, so everybody's going to be understanding where the bus is going. Number two, and this is where we fall down, is it shared and supported? Critical. If I'm going to support it, I need to know about it, and I need to get over my fear. Number four, this is where we mess up. It must be comprehensive and detailed. You must be able to answer the questions. It requires work to put it together, but the payoff is very substantive. And increasingly, when companies are looking for suppliers, they start digging into this to find out how much comprehensive detail you've put into the development of your vision, and does it ring true? Because if they're going to be with you for a while, they're going to want to ensure that your vision is going to line up with their vision. And last, if it's going to last, it needs to be positive and inspiring. Not up and make sure that when you put this together, that it's in the words of the people within the organization. It's not something that they'll snicker at or they won't pay attention to. You put those four elements together, it'll be in good shape. You'll be in good shape as far as the vision is concerned. The barriers, we could talk about barriers, and I'm sure that in this room, we probably suffer from the same kind of barriers, and we handle them in different ways. That's another reason why we should exchange. I'm going to slip by this slide here. When we start looking at how do you see the barriers, just touching on three very, very powerful tools to actually enable you to see the barriers. And I'm sure many of you are using this already from the comments I heard this morning. Number one is value stream mapping. Very interesting. In value stream mapping, we've got, can I do that here? Yeah, there we go. All right, that's just a typical value stream map that you might normally have in a manufacturing organization. Gets a little colorful sometimes when you get inside hospitals, and they do some pretty dramatic things. You got to be careful. Right now, some of the hospitals we're aware of are well ahead of manufacturers because they're taking it seriously because they don't have any choice. We have an entire province, the province of Saskatchewan, who from the government on down has mandated that the healthcare ministry must go lean, and they've been doing this since 2008, and they've got some amazing things to show. But the point I'm making is, when you do a value stream map, you do this walk along, oops, there we are, okay. You do the walk along, there's your horizontal value stream flow, and you walk along that, and you start seeing things, and this is just a different way of doing the same thing. We start seeing exactly where the wastes are and where the opportunities are. So that's one powerful tool. Now here's two more powerful tools. Gemba walks. In other words, just walking through the plant. It's shocking to know how many senior people have never walked a Gemba of their own plant. We were talking with Jim Womack a couple of days ago, and he was talking about a supermarket. And the executives were concerned about the nature of competition in the supermarkets. And they said, well, let's take a walk. And he said, why? And so he went to not where the raw material comes in, like the turnips and the rutabagas and so on, but at the other end where the customers come in. And as they walked through, they weren't even half through before the two guys were saying, holy cow. And we're the guys that are making the decisions that caused this. In other words, they had never walked the value stream. It was mind-blowing. But yet, I think if you think about it, you could see how that could be. So what we see in the companies that are moving ahead and moving around, they have a methodology for Gemba walking, and it doesn't have to be the same way. I'll send down some information to you on some of the Gemba walks that are being done for connection, as opposed to finding waste, as opposed to quality walks, as opposed, they're different walks and so on. So, and anybody wants it, they can get that from yourself. And the other, now this is new. I don't know whether there's any Ingersoll Rand people in this room, possibly. No Ingersoll Rand people? I didn't know whether I dare show this or not, but I guess there isn't. Okay, the person there, Dan McDonald, 3P, and that is production process planning. This is amazing. It is one of those hidden gems in the Toyota production system that doesn't get a lot of play. And what it really allows you to do is you simulate the whole. This is one hospital in the process of building a hospital, and this is a year ago. And they were putting together and modeling it. And then they made a full model with cardboard and everything else and so on and so forth, and now they're actually building it. And it's a totally different structure than it ever would have been any other way. The patients got involved, the community got involved, the doctors were involved, and so was everybody else. This one down here, same thing. That's Dan McDonald. He's in that. This is with the General Electric Corporation, where they modeled things associated with the manufacturing of railroad engines. And they took the manufacture of a railroad engine from 92 days down to 10. And if you don't think that's a lean success, that is horrendously. Took a few years to do it, but that's for a 420,000 pound locomotive. Now, lean, touching on lean, it's everywhere. There isn't anything on this slide where you don't have a story on. There's the clams out in the Atlantic Ocean. By applying lean, millions of dollars savings on that. There's the pick. When they did a value stream map from essay to smelter, guess what they found? Waste all over the place. All others in there. There's a dentist's office. John Rutherford's in Jacksonville, Florida. John Rutherford's sheriff's office is now a completely lean operation. So if you get yourself put in jail, you might even learn a little bit about lean while you're there. But actually, they've got the entire police force organized around lean. And some simple thoughts here as we cover this. Simple thoughts being, when you look at lean, it takes a long time to appreciate. It takes a long time to put in place, and it requires a single vision, and it requires a lot of leadership to put it in place. But keep in mind, we're making some mistakes here. One of the mistakes we're making is if we focus just on the tools, Kaizens and things of that nature, and 3P like I mentioned, if we focus just on that, you'll probably reach a level somewhere around 50 to 70% level of the top companies in the world. You'll still do very well if you do that, but you'll never get to the peak. You'll never get to the full value. And you're at base camp, basically, if you do just the tools. If you're going to head for being the top in your industry, you're going to really be looking at vision very, very tightly. And now you're going to be looking at human development, human growth, all the things that are involved with taking this. And where that comes from, thanks to the Australians, see my little drawing there? There's a bicycle, and there's a frog. And they refer to this when they're coaching inside their plants, and their suppliers at Toyota there as well. And bike symbol means that most of their employees are bike thinkers. And a bike thinker is a thinker, thinks interchangeable parts. Something breaks, you interchange it, that sort of thing. Frog thinkers are different. Frog thinkers know that if you take a frog apart, you can never put it back together again. Okay? And what that means is they understand that you touch any part of the organization, it's going to have an effect on the rest of the organization. And this is systems thinking. And more of us have to acquire this concept of systems thinking so that we look at the whole picture. And that's what this is implying here, that once you get into that level, you start looking at it that way. I'm just going to nip over a couple of slides here because I think I've already covered some of it, and we're cutting a little bit down here today. I put this one in because I don't know whether you've ever heard of Art Byrne or not. He was the guru, the leader at what is it? Wire mold. Thank you. At wire mold. And he makes this statement unreservedly, and if you're looking for a speaker, you might want to consider him sometime. He'll come up and he'll look you right in the eye and he'll say that lean provides an unfair competitive advantage. And then he goes on to tell you what he means and why only 4 to 7% of all our companies, ours included, are not utilizing lean to the degree that they could. And there's well over 90% of the value still out there, but boy, does it require a cultural change to make it happen. And I think I'll just stop with that. That's one. Leadership. This is the concept of the kind of leadership coming forward. Sometimes it's referred to as servant leadership. This one is, a leader is not an administrator who loves to run others, but someone who carries waste for his people so that they can get on with their jobs. So that's a little different concept than some leaders might have, etc. But it's that's a discussion on its own, actually. I'm going to slip over to the rest of these here, I think, and that'll give us about 5, 6, 7 minutes for any questions. Would that be okay? Okay. I wanted to go to these last 2 slides because these last 2 slides is action. Number 1, when we look at them, here's the questions to ask ourselves. And we've asked these of our operators, not our operators, but our companies in our consortium. Number 1, do we have a living vision? Well, what's a living vision? That's one that's in conversations every day in some way. If it's not in conversations, then it's not happening. You're fooling yourself if you think you've got a clear vision, but it's not being talked about. That's number 1. Number 2 is, does everybody know about where it is and where we're going? One of the favorite tricks is when we walk through some of our consortium companies, the first 10 people you see and don't know, and you ask them, what is the vision of the company? That gives you a pretty good idea of how far it's penetrated. Number 4, think about how wide is the talent? How deep is the talent, the leadership talent? And how much do we know about each other and our customers? How respectful are we? And how committed and disciplined and perceptive? These are deep questions that really require open conversation. And the last question I have, slide here, here's 5 steps. And I made a mistake there. That shouldn't be a dot on the bottom one. Number 1, bring your vision to life. That means talk about it. Number 2, do this from now on. Whenever there's a problem, don't go to the classroom or the boardroom. Go to the problem. Every single time, go to the problem. And see that problem in its natural state. And when you get there, go see, ask why, show respect. 2 things will happen. Number 1, you'll find out what really happened. Number 2, and I've talked to the employees after you've left, and the employee will say, my God, I never realized that the senior level thought we were that important, or the work we're doing is that important. Gee, looks like we're maybe going to work together a little bit. So get rid of judgmental things, but when you start looking at it from that point, walk your talk and talk your walk. Respect and listen to people. And I hope out of this short discussion we've had today, there might be one thing, but the things over the years that we've gotten out of this have been pretty substantial. So, Enrique, I think I'm tight on time here. So, thank you very much, everybody. I appreciate it.